This program is about hackers, the computer wizards who in just a decade created both a multi-billion-dollar industry and a cultural phenomenon. In the next half hour, we'll meet some of the heroes of the personal computer revolution. People like Steve Wozniak, designer of the Apple computer, video game whiz Bill Budge, and Macintosh programmer Andy Hertzfeld. We'll also find out how the hackers created the personal computer as a labor of love, and why their breakthroughs may transform the way we think, work, and play. Already, millions of personal computers are changing our daily lives at work, at school, and at home. At the touch of a button, you can now correct a letter without retyping it, recalculate complex financial projections, or send electronic mail across the world. Hundreds of programs let you manage your money, draw on your screen, teach your kids to type, and play shoot-'em-ups or adventure games. Yet we often forget that this universe of digital code and silicon chips was hacked away for nights on end by brilliant and fanatic designers. And while a happy few struck gold and became overnight millionaires, many early pioneers were less fortunate. As a group, hackers still are the unsung heroes of the electronic age. One longtime supporter of hackers is Stewart Brand, editor of the Whole Earth catalogs.
They are shy, sweet, incredibly brilliant, and I think more effective in pushing the culture around now in good ways than almost any group I can think of.
To make his point, Brand invited 100 top computer designers to an exclusive hackers conference in this secluded campsite north of San Francisco.
Anybody wants breakfast? Now's the time.
Despite bad weather and crude living conditions, the camp was a true hacker heaven. Well stocked with plenty of computer toys and, of course, enough candy and soda to last through the night.
This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people have so much to gain and have such an ulterior motive for putting me in a position I'm in. We'll never let the true facts come aboard to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the grotto leader? Don't remember his name. You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
Now these people are in very high positions,
Yes. Welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 286. I'm your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khalid.
And today, we have a massive episode in terms of importance and relevance. A long time coming, emphasis on the long, but the long is now. The long now. That's right. We're talking about. See that cut up technique I used right there?
Oh, you did. Yes.
I'm such a beat. Yes. Today we are returning to one of our favorite avenues of investigation, which is luminary. Well, on one level, luminaries of the San Francisco Bay Area counterculture in the 1960s and 70s. We've covered a lot of figures from this milieu over hundreds of episodes, but today is maybe even a little more special. Because we're really diving into somebody whose web whose web of influence extends so far beyond just a little group of hippies doing weird stuff in San Francisco in the late 60s, and extends to arguably almost everything else we talk about on this show in terms of modern American susness. right? So today we must call to the front this individual, Stewart Brand.
Yes.
And ask him to account for his lifetime of activities, to say the least. Yeah. I mean, Stewart Brand, like, where do we even begin with this guy? I think, the founder of the Whole Earth catalog. We've brought him up like tangentially in the last couple Epstein episodes, which maybe
and in episodes like previously as well. Like, I feel like the Whole Earth catalog has come up a lot, and it is like very like it is crazy. Like the sort of, I mean, we've read this book From Counterculture to Cyberculture by Fred Turner. And, we were just talking about, like, could this book, like, be a bit more critical? Like, probably, like, did it make some compromises in order to have access to some of its sources? Like, maybe. But it still does give, like, a very, like, vivid picture of, like, how... like the important role that Stewart Brand, like he was a connector of sorts, much like his friend Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes, and their friend Malcolm Gladwell, who I think wrote a whole book about that, about connectors, right?
Yes.
Like Stewart Brand's the ultimate connector, I would say. Right?
He really, and in fact, like a lot of his sort of like influence was like in how people thought about things like networks and connections. And the sort of the transformation of the ways in which we make connections in our lives through the internet and how we think about those things. Like it's definitely a thing in which he had a lot of influence.
Right. And also this sort of cybernetic insight. I think we, in our subliminal history of cybernetics back a few years ago, we talked about a lot of these things, but a lot of the insights of people like Norbert Wiener and later Gregory Bateson, both of whom are like massive influences on Stewart Brand. This idea of like technological tools shaping humanity. Like, I think in that Unabomber documentary, which we devoted a whole episode to, which features one of not inaccurate slip. Sorry. One of Brockman's, one of Stewart Brand's best friends, John Brockman.
Yes.
Who was one of the greatest enablers of Jeffrey Epstein, though the documentary didn't know it at the time in like 2002. He talks about like he had that quote, right? That humans make tools and then mold themselves to the uses of them. Or like humans make machines and we make machines and then we mold ourselves to the uses of them. So they had this very like techno-deterministic kind of philosophy that enraptured both these young men, Brockman and Brand, from the 1960s onward. And though their influences, they sort of added to their influences over the decades and evolved into kind of different directions. Stewart Brand subsequently became very enamored with Buckminster Fuller, but then kind of drifted away from Buckminster Fuller after a while and, then adopted kind of a new shiny philosophy, whatever. But those insights, those like cybernetic insights, are kind of at the root of this entire milieu of thinkers and influencers that found their final culmination in kind of a two-pronged, The two-pronged result of this network was, one, a group of people that either were orbiters or like key figures around this milieu became the gods of Silicon Valley and wield a massive, like inordinate amount of power over our lives today and the communication platforms that we all spend a lot of our days existing on, right? And like on top of that, all of these people, a lot of them 1960s hippie, techno-utopian, like fighting against the frickin' establishment, man, living in my houseboat in Sausalito, ended up being, in the case of the Edge Foundation, almost solely funded by maybe the most prolific pedophile deep state operative of the early 21st century, Jeffrey Epstein.
Mm-hmm.
Like...
In fact, Yeah, to like set the tone here, I kind of want to read this like one section which really like stuck with me from Fred Turner's book about like Stewart Brand's like early years like in college, and like he talks about like his diary entries. Do you remember this?
Yeah. I think are you talking about chapter 2?
Yeah.
So I actually, that was the first time I stumbled upon, actually, now that I think about it, got to give credit to the GOAT. I'm pretty sure the first time I saw What the Dormouse Said, Markoff's earlier book, and from counterculture to cyberculture, like reference a lot in like crypto cuttlefish tweets from like 10 years ago, you know?
Yeah.
But I think they were like on this tip. But actually, what's interesting about chapter 2, I think it's really great. We should read it, but let me just bring it up here, because when I was doing kind of John Brockman, Stewart Brand, kind of random Epstein research, I found this on edge.org, and John Brockman himself like excerpted this chapter or a big chunk of it, and wrote an introduction to it. And like once we get into like, just to set the stage, because it's not always foregrounded, like kind of where did Stewart Brand come from? Like what were his like first ideological and philosophical inclinations? It's pretty upfront in this book, but let me see, because this is also Brockman's kind of introduction to like meeting Stewart Brand and saying like why he's such a great guy and the long strange trip they've had together. And then he excerpts like the chapter almost at length. Which I feel like in the framing of John Brockman, like makes like Stewart Brand's background seem actually more sus, like not less.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So let me just read here. Yeah, this is from 2006 on, the Edge Foundation's website, which at this time I think was being funded by Jeffrey Epstein almost entirely. And John Brockman writes, "When I first met Stewart Brand in 1965, he was sporting a button on which was printed, 'America Needs Indians.' We were at the headquarters of USCO, U.S. Company, more on that later, an anonymous group of artists whose installations and events combine multiple audio and visual inputs, including film, slides, video, lighting, music, and random sounds. We were both wearing remnants of our U.S. Army uniforms. We hit it off immediately and have been in touch consistently for the past 41 years. USCO's mantra, 'We are all one,' had already been altered to 'We are all one, except Brockman,' in order to accommodate my involvement. In 1963, the group had erected a psychedelic tabernacle in a church half an hour outside Manhattan, in Garnerville, New York. It became an obligatory step for every seeker and guru passing through the area. Stewart lived there in the steeple for a while. Stewart was fascinated with the USCO community of artists, including painter Steve Durkee and poet Gerd Stern, and with Rockland County neighbors such as John Cage, all of whom were reading, studying, and debating Marshall McLuhan's ideas on communications. In fact, at one point, USCO went on tour with McLuhan and provided an, quote, intermedia counterpoint to his talks. Brand, who preferred the term multimedia to intermedia, performed his America Need Indians piece from 1964 to 1966 and performed War, God from 1967 to 70. He organized the Trips Festival in January 1966, just as I was running the expanded Cinema Festival in New York at Filmmaker Cinematheque. That's the famous Trips Festival we talked about on Secret Machine Music, right? Stewart Brand was the main organizer behind it. In March 1966, he created the Whole Earth button. It read, "Why haven't we seen a photograph of the whole Earth yet?" This conceptual piece was the center of his 1968 campaign for a picture of the whole Earth, which led, in no small part, to the creation of the ecology movement. He is the king of initially obscure, ultimately compelling conceptual art. Call it reality. Brand is best known to my generation as the founder, editor, and publisher of the Whole Earth catalog. I recall visiting him in Menlo Park, California in 1968 while he was working on the original. His wife at the time, Lois, a Native American mathematician, spent an entire day working on the catalog with the layout person while Brand and I sat together reading and underlining a copy of Norbert Wiener's Cybernetics, a book Cage had handed to me at a dinner in New York. I still have that copy. Several months later, the oversized catalog arrived packed in a long tube. The original Whole Earth catalog captured the moment and defined the intellectual climate of the times. A subsequent edition, the last Whole Earth catalog, edited by Ken Kesey and Paul Krasner, published in 1971, was a #1 bestseller and won Brand the National Book Award. Damn. During the 70s, he often talked about his vision for what he called the personal computer, a term he is often credited with inventing, although he's quick to point out that Alan Kay deserves credit for its coinage. Quote, Alan credits me for being the first for being the first to use it in print in '74 in my book, Two Cybernetic Frontiers, he says. I don't recall others using it as a term, and I don't think I was doing a coinage, just describing the Xerox Alto in an epilogue in the book. By 1975, I did use it as the name of a regular section in the Co-Evolution Quarterly, well before personal computers existed. In 1983, Brand sent Dick Farson and Daryl Ickenoggle of the Western Behavioral Science Institute to see me in New York about a piece of conferencing software called The Onion, which is being used on a bulletin board system called EIES, Electronic Information Exchange System, and run by Murray Turoff. When I demurred, Stewart told me I could be a player or I could choose to sit out the biggest development of the decade. I chose to sit it out. Stewart was right and wrong. It was the biggest development of the 90s, not the 80s. Inspired by EIES, in 1984, Stewart co-founded the WELL, Whole Earth Electronic Link, a computer teleconference system for the San Francisco Bay Area, considered a bellwether of the genre. That year, Stewart's Point Foundation received a publishing advance of $1.3 million for the Whole Earth software catalog, a record deal for a paperback original to this day. As a spin-off, he and Kevin Kelly organized the first hackers conference at Fort Cronkite, the old Army barracks north of the Golden Gate Bridge. It was in his talk at the conference that Stewart spoke his prophetic words, "Information wants to be free," before a hacker audience that included Steve Wozniak, Ted Nelson, Captain Crunch, Ted Draper, and Richard Stallman, among others. I was also there. Stewart had convinced Doug Carlston, the founder of Broderbund, and myself to put up the money to finance the event. Stewart's talk was later published in a May 1985 article in Whole Earth Review entitled Keep Designing, How the Information Economy is Being Created and Shaped by the Hacker Ethic. Clearly, some of the interesting thinking about the internet has its origins in ideas formulated by the artists of the 60s, which, wittingly or unwittingly, were carried forward by the enthusiastic young Lieutenant Brand. Considerations of form and content, context, community, and even the hacker ethic were all presaged in part by activities and discussions during that period. Indeed, and this is funny, actually. Indeed, a recent German feature-length movie, Das Netz by Lutz Dambeck, makes this very point and does it quite well, until it melts down by putting forth the bizarre and absurd thesis that the motivating factor behind the criminally insane murderer Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was his desire to stop the network created by Brand and myself. Anyways, still mad about it.
Yeah.
Several years later, in the 1990s, the LA Times Magazine published a cover story, "Always 2 steps ahead of others. He is the least recognized, most influential thinker in America." The story was about Stewart Brand. The story was absolutely correct. Stewart Brand is the most influential thinker in America. JB. Wow. So yeah, that's I love that he still hates anything about the Unabomber. He fucking can't handle anybody talking about. But then we move on to the chapter 2 of this Fred Turner book, which opens up this part specifically. It was acknowledged in the Markov book, but it severely downplayed. He mentions a few times in it that Stewart always had a deep contempt for the New Left. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's very interesting. This kind of is a corrective in a way to. There's even a part, a section in the book that's called the counterculture that wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
It is it does take a strong, or Fred Turner's book does take kind of a strong stance that this wasn't really a counterculture, and in fact was of a piece with or in continuity with the kind of they're military focused knowledge production that have been happening previously, the whole epistemic apparatus of the Cold War,
right.
in American institutions of knowledge production and things like that.
Right. Up to and including the sort of bleeding edge psychological social kind of research into things like LSD, which play a huge role in Stewart Brand's early life. But even before that, we'll see here that
I think it's revealing in another way too. We should definitely read this part. I think it's revealing in another way too, because it really shows kind of what what the ultimate, or it gives a compelling picture or kind of a persuasive theory about like what the ultimate like sort of ideological motivations of all of this like really were, and what like really was like sort of the driving ethos of it, which I think you can really see like in its like manifestation today and like where we are now. Like you can really see the same kind of like basic principles. Everything else is kind of superficial and like fell away as time went on, or not even as time went on, like was but
whatever radical left like attributes like this early thing had, it feels more like an insight role sort of mask that eventually was like dropped when no longer necessary. Like that was almost a Trojan horse to get some of these ideas like in the door and like accepted by people who otherwise would not accept them. And in some cases this was that was not especially the techno optimism was a hard sell for a lot of hippies, like in this kind of original kind of hippie types in the 60s. They were very suspicious of like advanced technology and the sort of like computer apparatus, like the free speech movement.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Like was people hung like computer punch cards around there. It was like, don't fold me or bend me or something like that. Like they were kind of like, I don't want to be a computer. Even like the Allen Ginsberg kind of deep poetry has that vibe of like, I'm not a number. Like, don't, whatever.
For sure. No, yeah. And that like is a part of this, but it's like, like you can kind of see like the ultimate like valence that it had, like that in and of itself, like the suspicion of advanced technology, like does not like, I guess you could say like, I mean, it's good to be suspicious of like new technologies, I guess, depending on, who is like, in control of them and things like that. Obviously, like you could talk about like, but it's kind of hard to like actually have like the critique of like technology per se, like doesn't really have like content in and of itself, right? Like if it doesn't have like any kind of like critique of the systems in which these technologies are embedded, then it doesn't really like. Let's just read this.
All right.
Do you want to go?
I'll jump in. Yeah. So this chapter is Stewart Brand meets the cybernetic counterculture, and Fred Turner writes, coming out of the gate hot here. In the spring of 1957, at the height of the Cold War, Stewart Brand was a 19-year-old freshman at Stanford University, and he was deeply worried. Even though Europe lay more than 6,000 miles to the east, Brand had begun to write at length in his diary about his fear that the Soviet Union would soon attack the United States. If the Soviets invaded, he wrote, he could expect, quote, that my life would necessarily become small, a gear with its place on a certain axle of the communist machine, perhaps only a tooth on the gear, that my mind would no longer be my own, but a tool carefully shaped by the descendants of Pavlov, that I would lose my identity, that I would lose my will. These last are the worst. Okay.
For access to the full-length episode, subscribe to the Hour of Frequency at patreon.com/subliminaljihad.